guys, welcome back to Flying Fids. I'm Juan, and in this video we're going to be talking about seeds versus pellet diets and why you should consider switching your birds over to a pelleted diet. And then I'll show you a few methods of how you can get your birds to eat pellets or convert them over to a pelleted diet from a seed diet. And I'll also throw in a few tips in the end, so stick around for that and let's get into it. So let's talk about seed diets. So seed diets is one of the top causes of bird deaths, and that's because of the misconception that birds only eat seeds. Now, when people think that birds only eat seeds, that's what birds are going to be fed for their whole lives, and they're going to be malnourished. Seeds are very high in fats, and they don't have the vitamins and minerals that birds would need in their diet. Seed diets for birds can lead to obesity, heart and liver disease, vitamin deficiencies, and other health issues that can stay with your birds for the rest of their lives. Birds on all seed diets also have really poor feather qualities, and you can usually tell because their feathers look dull instead of being bright and vibrant. You've probably heard of this saying before, and it's really common, and it's that seed diets to birds is like fast food to humans. Fast food might taste good, but it won't be good for our overall health. So I'm not saying that birds shouldn't eat seeds at all, it's just that their diets shouldn't be comprised solely of seeds, and it should only be about 10% or less of their diets. So let's talk about pelleted diets. Pelleted diets are recommended as the base for your bird's diet, and your birds shouldn't just be eating pellets alone because too much of one thing is bad. Pellets should of course be given in addition to fresh veggies, some fruits and grains. Pellets were created to be nutritionally balanced, and it contains the proper amounts of fat content, vitamins, and minerals to keep your birds healthy. And of course, not all pellets are created equal, and there are some pellets that are filled with unnecessary ingredients like food dyes and flavorings that might look attractive to your bird, but it's not really great for them. You should find a quality pellet that works for you and your bird. Some common brands include Supreme, Harrison's, Tops, and Rowdy Bush. So before switching your bird over to a pelleted diet from a seed diet, you of course want to make sure that your bird is healthy. You don't want to transition your bird over to a new diet, especially if they're sick, because their bodies won't be able to handle all that change. You of course want to talk to your avian vet first and schedule an appointment for a checkup. You also want to think about getting blood work done just so that you can check the overall health status of your bird. And then based on that checkup, you can talk to your vet about the best diet plan for your bird so that they could be in tip-top shape. Then the other thing you want to do is, if you don't have one already, is to get a gram scale or a food scale, and you're going to be using that to keep track of your bird's weight, just to make sure that they're not losing too much weight while they're switching over to a new diet. And a good habit to start, if you're not doing it already, is to weigh your birds every morning right after they take that big morning poop, just so you get an idea of their healthy weight. And it's also one way to tell if they're sick. If they lose about 10% of their body weight, then you can go ahead and take your bird to the vet for a checkup and see what's wrong with them. Now let's get into the methods of how you can transition your birds over to a pelleted diet. So for the first method, you've probably heard of this one before because it is common, and it's also one of the slower methods, and that is to gradually introduce the new food with your bird's old food over a course of a few weeks or a couple months. And depending on how receptive your bird is to the pellets, it'll help you decide when to move on to adding less seeds and more pellets. For the first 2 weeks, you want to combine 75% of their old food with 25% of their new food. And moving on to weeks 3 and 4, you want to add a little more of the new food and less of the old food, so about 65% old and 35% new. The following weeks after that, so for weeks 5 and 6, you can then put in about 50% of the old food and 50% of the new food. For weeks 7 and 8, you want to add in only 25% of their old food and 75% of their new food, and then you could transition your birds over to pellets for the following weeks. Now, this method might not work for all birds because birds are really smart and they are going to pick out their favorites, so they just might eat the seeds and not touch the pellets at all. But I do have some tips and tricks that I will share with you towards the end of the video to help your birds speed things along in transitioning them over to a pelleted diet. For method number 2, you're going to be changing up the texture a little bit. For this method, it's completely okay if your birds don't eat the pellets at first, because the whole goal of this method is to try and get your birds to get a little taste of the pellets so that they could eventually eat less seeds and more pellets. So for the first week, you want to crush up your pellets until it's like a fine dust, and mix 50% of the crushed pellets with 50% of their old diet. And before you feed it to your birds, you want to mix in a little bit of water until it's like a paste-like consistency. Moving on to the second week, you want to do the same thing as the week before, but this time you're going to add in some whole wet pellets and a few dried pellets and feed this for about a week. For week 3, you're going to make the same thing as the previous week, but add in less water and more dried whole pellets and a little less seed, and continue this for the following weeks until you're just just giving them whole pellets. Also, for this method, you don't want to leave the food in their cage for too long because it is going to start building up bacteria, so that's not good for your birds. You want to make sure to remove the food that they haven't finished after about a couple hours, and if it's warmer where you are, you want to remove the food a lot sooner, so about an hour and a half after you've given them the food. For method number 3, it's going to work if your birds are already eating fresh veggies and fruits. The goal of this method is to help your birds understand that pellets are food. When you're feeding your birds their regular chop, you want to sprinkle on some of the crushed pellets over the top and throw in some partially crushed and whole pellets as well. So it's kind of similar to the second method where you want your birds to be able to get a little taste of the pellets. So you can continue doing this for a couple of weeks, gradually adding in less crushed pellets and more whole pellets on top of their chop. You can also offer some pellets to the side while giving them their regular chop as well. Similar to the second method, you also don't want to leave their chop out for too long because it is going to build bacteria as well. So moving on to the tips to help speed up the process. Every bird is different and they each have their own unique personalities, and they will be receptive to eating pellets at different rates. To help speed up the process, no matter which method you choose, first tip that I want to share with you, and it's something that worked for my birds as well, is that you want to pretend that you're eating the pellets. Birds are of course flock animals, so if they see you eating the pellets, they are going to want to try it out as well. So what you want to do is grab a pellet, hold it up to your mouth, and with your other hand, using your thumb and pointer fingernails, snap them together so it sounds like you're kind of grinding and eating the pellets. And once your bird sees you doing that, you want to offer them the pellet from your hand. So you want to make sure that your bird is watching you while you're doing this. It might take a couple of tries for you to do this until they start nibbling on it. For the next tip, it's kind of similar to the first tip. You want to pretend like you're eating it, but this time you want to throw the pellet into their water dish and fish it out right away, and then pretend to eat it and offer it to your bird. This will kind of give them the idea of, hey,
maybe I could try dipping the pellets into the water before I eat it.
Which is what birds tend to do when they're eating pellets. This way you're giving them a different texture to try, and maybe they prefer it to be softened up before eating. So for the third tip, you can try offering them nutriberries. Now, nutriberries are really great. They are made up of seeds, but they also have pellets incorporated into them. So you want to crumble up the nutriberries so it looks like their old food, and then you can offer that to them along with some pellets. For the fourth tip, some birds in their natural habitat prefer to forage on the ground, so you can kind of mimic the same behavior. You can try either of the methods that I've mentioned, but instead of placing it in their food bowl, you can place the food on the bottom of the cage, maybe on a plate, so it'll encourage them to forage. Moving on to the fifth tip, birds tend to be hungrier in the morning and in the late afternoon. You want to make sure to remove their food bowls before putting them to bed and have either of the methods that I mentioned prepared and ready for them to eat first thing in the morning. For the last and final tip, you can also consider changing up the pellet sizes or the pellet brands as well. You can also think about transitioning your birds over to a colored pellet at first because it is a lot more enticing than natural pellets. If you plan on using colored pellets, it'll also be easier for your birds to transition over to a natural pellet. Also, here are some important things to remember while you are transitioning your bird over to a pelleted diet. The first thing is that you want to make sure that you're not forcing your bird to eat pellets by removing their seeds completely and just giving them pellets. Most birds will have no idea that pellets are food, and they could actually starve themselves. It's also important to weigh your birds in the morning right after they've taken their big morning poop, just so you can keep track of their weight during the conversion process and to make sure that they're not losing too much weight. Another thing that you can do to monitor their weight and to see if they're actually eating the pellets is to take a look at their poop. So if you see less solid matter in your bird's poop, then it most likely means that they're not eating at all. For whichever method you use, you do want to take a few steps back so that you're making sure that your bird is actually eating food. Last thing to remember is to make sure that you stay consistent and have patience, because those are going to be your two best friends while you are trying to get your bird on a healthier diet. A lot of owners give up way too soon because they think it's hard, or they think that there is a set amount of time for them to be able to transition over to a pelleted diet, but that is not the case. Every bird is different and they are going to eventually eat the pellets at their own pace. A healthy bird starts with a healthy diet, so stick to it, don't give up, and you'll have a happy and healthy bird. Don't forget to like and share this video if you found it to be helpful. Also, comment down below and let me know if you're excited to try and transition your bird over to a pelleted diet, and also if you've heard any other tips that I haven't mentioned in this video, because I'd love for you to share and have other people read it as well. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more videos like this, and also hit that notification bell and select all notifications so you get notified every time we post a new video. That's pretty much it for this video, and I'll see you in the next one.